What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick,
My name is
and
Dave.
this is the Deep Dive, and we are jumping back into our Revelation series. We kind of took a little bit of a hiatus from it, and now we're back. And I know you said during the service today that you're going to be squeezing 3 sermons of content into 2, so these are going to be some pretty full podcasts, I would assume, as well.
Yeah, I think so. Particularly next week. This sermon actually was pretty much what I had planned to do.
Oh, okay.
Maybe made a couple of little introductions to next week. Next week I'm going to be busy.
Yeah, we're going to be hustling.
I'll be hustling, yeah.
But it'll be good, and I'm ready to get into this. I'm glad we are at least going to finish this up, tie the bow on this
Sure,
Revelation study.
me too. I want to. So,
All right,
very
let's
much.
do it.
Okay.
All right, Dave. Well, we are actually filming on a Sunday today. Tomorrow is Memorial Day. Do you have any plans for Memorial Day? Anything going on?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going out of town or anything. We've got some stuff to grill. We've got some yard work to do. My daughter and her husband are here with us at our house.
Nice.
So, yeah, just kind of family stuff at home.
Yeah,
How
same
about you?
here. We're not doing anything crazy. We have a couple people coming over. We're going to grill out, and hopefully the weather stays away a little bit. But it looks like it's going to rain tomorrow quite often.
But yeah, it's going to be a nice day today. Memorial Day is an important holiday or recognition day
It is.
of our servicemen and women who gave their lives for our freedom and our country.
Yep.
And so we took some time to acknowledge that in the service because I think that's important. And I think I will try to make some time to do something intentional with that tomorrow. But it's also the unofficial beginning of summer, maybe is what they call it. What do they call it? Our official beginning of summer?
Yeah, a lot of people will say it's the official beginning of summer, even
Yeah.
though it doesn't line up with the dates of, the calendar or whatever. But people, because I think school gets out and all that stuff, everybody's like, it is now summertime.
Yeah. What is the official first day of summer? Is it
I have
June
no
June
clue.
20th, maybe?
Yeah, it's something like that.
So
It's like mid to end.
We're still
June.
in spring.
We're still technically in spring.
Okay.
But it's kind of like, when I go, like we go away on September for vacation, and it's not technically summer will end a little bit before that, I think, but we call that the end of summer. So
Sure.
because it's like our last little trip,
Okay. So
it changes.
I'm glad we shared this very interesting information about calendaring with our
That's
people
right.
and our listeners today.
But we are ready for summer, but we're also ready to get into Revelation today. So why don't you kind of give us an idea?
But I will say part of what's driving me trying to get finished. One is I started a long time ago, and then
Yep.
the thing with my mother-in-law and all, it's just been I've been dealing with Revelation for a long time.
Yep.
So I enjoy it, but I am ready to be over. But I also want to catch. It's like surfing. I want to catch that wave of summer as it starts with the summer series. And
Sure.
so we'll certainly talk about that next week of where we're going this summer. But we're back in Revelation, and it is just a quick reminder for the listeners who maybe weren't in church is that Revelation is the last book of the Bible, sometimes a controversial book, sometimes a book that's hard to understand. I will say it's hard to understand because it's very different from all the other New Testament books. The other New Testament books are much more straightforward, much able to read. The Gospels, the letters. There's definitely interpretive skills that are needed in all our Bible reading, but so much so with Revelation, which is written in this sort of weird language. And so, I wanted to stress once again, which I have all through the series, that we are talking about something that's important to understand in its context, in its culture,
Yep.
in its time. Because there are people, lots of people, that use Revelation as in sort of a way of, it's sort of like this puzzle pieces, and we can foretell the future with it, and this is going to happen, or Obama's the Antichrist, or Trump's the Antichrist, or all those kinds of things that really is. I don't hear any other way to say it. It's just really poor scholarship.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that do that.
Get their bulletin boards out,
and
pull their red strings.
And they sell a lot of books and raise a lot of excitement. And it's very entertaining,
Yeah.
but it's not the way the Bible works.
Right.
And so I tried to approach it from a way of like, how can we understand it? Because as is with all the Bible, we can apply that into our context and time, because some of the things that we're dealing with in our country, we can find parallels in Revelation. And some of the encouragements and the warnings we can certainly apply to us as well.
Sure.
And so there were these 7 churches that were there in what is present-day Turkey that John is writing to while he is in essentially prison. He's in exile in Patmos. And he's writing them at this time that's there's a lot of persecution going on of Christian church. They're a crazy emperor. Emperor worship had been around a while, but there was one that was now ruling who was insisting on it and insisting being called a god. And so there was a lot of pagan worship and a lot of, I would call emperor worship pagan worship, but a lot of pagan temples where the Greek gods and the Roman gods and this Roman emperor worship all get mixed together. And it was sort of a nationalistic religion, such that if you didn't participate in it, then you got left out of commerce, you got left out of family stuff, you got left out of stuff, and you were even persecuted to the point of death in some cases for not giving in to the empire. One of the things I pointed out in the message today is there is this sort of overarching message to the 7 churches. They are nuanced. Every church has its own specific things. But if there's one overarching message that's there and that Revelation has is, are you going to be loyal to the empire, or are you going to be loyal to Christ? Are you going to follow the empire in its ways, or are you going to follow Christ? And how do you navigate that? Because they had to live, they had to work, they had to take part in that. But where is the line where it's no longer just being a part of being out in the culture, but it's you've let the culture influence you to a part that is apart from the Christian faith?
Yeah.
That makes sense?
It does.
Yeah.
It does make sense. And I think that's something, if we're looking for parallels to current culture, this is one of those things that feels like it's always kind of present and not necessarily serving the empire maybe as much, because, at least here in America, we don't necessarily have leadership that demands that kind of stuff out of us, because we
Right.
have that freedom of religion and stuff like that. But I do see it in culture quite often of just like trying to serve, the need for money, or trying, serving these other gods per se, maybe these little G gods or whatever some people would say. But, it's that constant battle of like, are we going to be so ingrained in what the world's telling us to be, or are we going to like continue to follow Christ? And I think those are big challenges.
Yeah. So there are 2 churches that we looked at today. One was Thyatira, which is actually the longest message that John writes. Not that any of them are super long, but it's the longest, most in-depth message of the 7 messages. Right. And the other one was Sardis. And they were, there were some nuances to what they were struggling with. It's interesting in the Church of Thyatira because it talks about that they were growing. They were growing in their love, and they were growing in those things. But yet it kind of has sort of some of the most harshest stuff about how they were corrupt and they were compromising that. So I'm not really sure how to draw the parallel there, except that I think churches can do a lot of stuff that outwardly look good. They can have active, membership, active programs, full congregation, but yet they've been corrupted with their message, and they've been they're compromised their message. He also talks a lot about Jezebel, which Jezebel is I think is part of our common culture. People, you call somebody a Jezebel, and they have a very specific thing that they're thinking about, right? And it's usually some sort of seducting women kind of thing. And that definitely was a part of who Jezebel actually was. Jezebel's a very old Jewish character. It goes back to the Old Testament. Yep. She was this person that married King Ahab as a queen, and she corrupted him, led him astray, built there in Israel, in Jerusalem, a sanctuary, whatever you call it, church, whatever.
Temple.
Thank you, Nick. temple to the goddess Aphrodite's,
Right.
and that was a horrible influence on that. But the main thing she did was she convinced Ahab and those who followed her and where she used her power to kill a lot of the prophets or some of the key prophets there. And so, she is thought of as this evil character, and it's really become a trope.
Yeah.
It was a trope back then. It's still a trope today to call somebody a Jezebel or to have a Jezebel spirit. And so I try to give some words to a definition around it. It's about this Jezebel. Let me see if I can find what I wrote about the Jezebel spirit. Jezebel is a symbol of religion that's separated from God. You were getting to that. And located and focused on success at all cost.
Yeah.
Okay? And so, we have to ask ourselves, how do we do that in our personal lives? How are we doing that as a church? Are we focused on success over our faithfulness to God? Are we, and are we compromising in such a way that is what we know of our morals and ethics that come out of our Christian faith, Christian witness, following the Bible? How has that been compromised? And so I do think there's a strong message we can apply to life today. But for those people, there was either, and we don't know if they were male or female, we don't know if it was one person or a group of people, but he calls out this Jezebel spirit that's there in that church.
Yeah.
And, and says that he's warned them and asked them to repent. And they haven't done that. And so he's got some pretty harsh warnings of what's going to happen if they don't do that.
Yeah.
And so,
Do you think success, like when you're overly focused on success, do you think it's the intention behind why you want to be successful that matters? Because I do think sometimes, I might even get a little confused where like, how much am I working hard to glorify God, or am I working hard for my own personal success? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And like, what's the defining factor in that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was thinking about it, trying to apply it to myself a little bit. Like, what decisions I might make within, let's just say, the church,
Yeah.
that are not going. They're drawn more on like, this would be successful. We could get a lot of people to show up for this, and so we should do that. Where Christ may be leading us somewhere else to do something that actually might cause some people to leave or go.
Right.
It's just like, well, this is going to be popular, so let's do it. Now, there's nothing wrong with being popular. One of the points that I never got around to today was like, and we'll get into the dead church in a second with Sardis, but like the church is not called to entertain people.
Right.
It's called to disciple people and equip people.
Right.
That doesn't mean that can't be exciting and interesting.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we, people that are leader in positions like I'm in, say, I'll do this because it'll be popular and entertaining. And, I think what he's addressing here is probably a lot more vile than what I'm talking about. But I do think it scoots up to the edge of that sort of like, what is leading us? Is it making disciples, or is it filling up the pews in the collection plate?
Right.
So let's do things, let's couch our message, let's do things that we know that will be popular.
Yeah.
And, so another way that I see is what we talked about with Christian nationalism.
Right.
In that people have put some things that they very well know that the Bible is not leading them in that way, or the Bible speaks against, or it's not the message of Christ, but they've couched them in a way to fit the needs of the empire, or certain people in the empire, above than what Christ would say. So Christ says to love your neighbor, to welcome the stranger, with him without sin, cast the first stone. All this sort of message. I've even heard pastors and church leaders say, "Yeah, well, that Jesus said, also, to take up swords and all that kind of stuff." So that makes sense. I don't want to get too far down into the weeds on that.
Yeah.
But I think people know what I'm talking about. we need to reflect the message of Christ. And sometimes it's going to make us, where we might have been comfortable politically, it might lead us to another place.
Yeah.
And it's on both sides.
Right.
And so we always say that, don't we? But yeah, I'm not calling out one party of the other, but I'm just saying there has been this epidemic, I think, of Christian nationalism where, there's the Constitution is an important document,
Yeah.
but it is not
Biblical.
It's not biblical, and therefore putting it in the Bible, that gets really weird.
Yeah.
For me.
I agree.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and to me, it really goes back to intentions. Like, you look at the scripture, and when you add, the Declaration of Independence or stuff like that, it's like, what is your intention behind this?
Right.
Like, why create this? Is this to say that America's in line with God? Okay. Like I really do think in a lot of what we've talked about, it really matters on intention. Is our intention to glorify and pursue God, or is our intention to somehow boost us or boost America or boost, whatever we're striving for up higher than our need to serve God?
And also people say this, and everybody's going to say this from the same perspective, but we're on Memorial Day, and people gave their lives for this country and our freedoms. And I really do think some of them would roll over the grave with what they've seen happen with Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
And all of that. So that's enough of that, because I know we're going to get into another subject that is kind of up your bailiwick.
No.
And that was the second church, the dead church.
Yeah.
This is a church of Sardis. What is interesting, I pointed this out to me in the sermon, is that, you've got the 7 churches named, and there are churches even today that are named. Smyrna is a name that you hear associated with churches.
Yeah, quite often.
Philadelphia is a name, that's associated with churches. I know of a Philadelphia United Methodist Church. I know of a Smyrna United Methodist Church.
Yeah.
I also know of a Sardis Baptist and a Sardis United Methodist Church. So that's a name. And when you look at the message to Sardis, you're going like, well,
why would you want to be named after that?
why would you want to be named after that? Because I really do think it is a pretty hard-hitting message. And one thing I noticed in the form that John writes is usually he gives words of encouragement. He starts right in on them.
Yeah.
And he says, you're a church that has a reputation for being alive. You're not. You're dead. And so
that would be hard to hear as a leader or to read or whatever.
Yeah, you think you're doing great. You're not. You're dead. And part of the reason was, and maybe the majority of the reason, was they had separated what they did inside the church and outside the church. What was inside the church was the sacred and all that. I have my church life, and I love my church life, and it's good, and it's but it is not influencing what I'm doing outside the walls. I separate my religion. We are supposed to hold our religion and the state separate, but not the religion and our personal lives.
Right.
So we are our faith should be informing everything that we do.
Yeah.
And so I pulled out a Barna study, and actually it was up to 2019 actually. So you think about what's happened since then.
COVID, all that.
I mean, it's worse now, but it looked at the drop out. And Barna, if you don't know, is a group that gathers a lot of data, does a lot of surveys and stuff. They're kind of like the Gallup polls for Christians.
Right.
And all throughout my ministry, they've been around for a long time. All throughout my ministry, and I'm sure yours have too, you looked at stuff that Barna was saying. I would say over like the last 10 or 15 years, the church has sort of like looked at it with a lot of cynicism because it was telling us some really hard things to hear.
Yeah.
And part of it has to do with our relevance and also the decline of the American church. Not just the United Methodist Church, but really all evangelical denominations have really, people are dropping out.
Yeah.
And so there's this one survey I was trying to pull from, and it was talking specifically about young people who still call themselves Christian, but do not go to church anymore. There was a survey dealing with that, why they had stopped going to church. Maybe when they grew up in youth group, they were youth group kids, but when they got to be young adults and started having families, they dropped out. And why? And, we're not for entertaining people, but I do think their message is much deeper than like church is boring. It needs to be more entertaining. I think.
Well, from the quotes you put up on the screen, and if you didn't see it, you can go check it out on the YouTube or the Facebook, YouTube, whatever, where the stream is. But it actually spoke to quite the opposite,
Right, it
you
does.
know, of like none of them were like, oh, I really want this to be better within the walls. It was more of like, I really yearn for. I mean, this is just a very general summarization, but like, I yearn for church to be part of my life outside of here more so than inside of here.
Right. I'll read the 3 quotes that I pulled. And there were more than this, but of why they had stopped. I want to find a way to follow Jesus that connects with the world I live in.
Yeah, I don't want to just come to church and just experience Jesus there. I want him to be a part of all of that.
And so as a pastor and leader of a church, so I say, ouch.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we do that. I think we do that, but we're obviously not. I mean, we're missing it some way. Second one, God is more at work outside the church than inside, and I want to be a part of that.
Life changes happen.
Yeah. I want to be a Christian without separating myself from the world around me. And so that speaks to, the third one, that was part of the reason I pulled it out, really speaks to the Sardis and the warning to the Sardis church.
Yeah.
Don't
get too insulated.
Yeah, they were insulated. It's not that they didn't have good worship. It's not that they were taking care of their own.
Yeah.
But they weren't having any influence. They were dead out in the community.
Yeah.
And so, we have a quote, may still be up in our on our office whiteboard. It says, if Hickory Flat Church failed to exist, would the community notice?
Yeah. Would it matter?
Would it matter? And so, I think that is a warning that we can hear.
Yeah.
And should respond to.
Yeah, I agree. And, this isn't just a young families thing. I think a lot of people yearn to be a part of something that's making change all over the place. We come to church and I can speak from a young family, like you want certain experiences for your kids.
Right.
You want them to be able to grow in a safe place, because they're not going to learn about it in public school. Like this is the place you take them to grow and to learn. So there is that educational component to it, but I think sometimes where church sometimes struggles, and this isn't just a Hickory Flat church or like, I think it's just church in general, is that application outside the walls of like, what does it mean to live your life this way, or to kind of talk shop of like, hey, I did this week, and this might be where I failed to show Christ. How do I do it better next time? But it's still that like, some people I've talked to have been like, well, I'm not a good enough Christian to be a minister or whatever. But that's kind of like, well, none of us are worthy enough, but God calls us all, and we need ministers at a car dealership. We need ministers at a lawyer's office, at the Weather Channel. You know what I mean? Like we need people who will go minister to those people there. Like we should be empowering our congregation to be ministers of the faith wherever they go. And
Right.
and that's, I know there's some power behind the word minister, but
I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
I really do. I mean, that's right on.
Yeah.
Because I think we have in the church for a long time, so we're inside the church and we're going to go and take this program, which maybe look like, tracks or something or, whatever. And we're going to go outside the church and we're going to do it to other people. And they're going to respond and come back to our church to help us do more of the same. And I don't know if it's ever worked that way. That might have been that kind of marketing, driven kind of thing. Might have at one time. But
Sure.
what we need are people that are just living their Christian lives and how they treat others, how they treat their children, what their priorities lives are, what their ethics are,
Yeah.
what their morals are. They don't have to be witnessing and quoting scripture and all that, but it just flows out of them. And then that's having influence into the community.
yeah.
We make it too program driven, I think, often. So, just looking at the time here, I do want to touch on this one other point, and that is like if we were looking at the United Methodist calendar, this was an important Sunday in that I addressed it a little bit, and it just sort of happened that it worked out well with the sermon. this is what we call Aldersgate Sunday. Aldersgate Day was actually a couple of days ago,
Friday, right?
Friday, yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the day that we recognize and remember that John Wesley had his heartwarming experience at Aldersgate, where he was really struggling with his faith. He was really struggling with his own personal salvation. And the Holy Spirit moved him on such a way that he said he felt his heart strangely warmed.
Yep.
And from that point on, his life really began to change.
Yep.
Now, you didn't see, if we judge ministry on numbers, you didn't really see that success at first.
Yep.
Because when he first started preaching, he preached with a lot of enthusiasm and excitement and in ways that were offending the people that were inside the church, the local pew sitters, and particularly the Anglican priests at that time.
Yep.
And so he would get invited. I don't think he was appointed. He might have been appointed to a parish. I can't quite remember the timeline of the history, but he would get invited to preach at different parishes, and he would go and preach, and maybe one time or two times, or maybe
we're good.
he may be assigned for a church for a short time, and within a few weeks he was gone. Because people just did not like the way that his message was so, buoyant and enthusiastic and charismatic and all of that. So he went to preach at his home church, which was in Epworth, St. Andrew in Epworth. His dad was the local parish priest there for years and years. And he got there, he got kicked out of there. And so he went outside, and I put up a painting of it. It's kind of a famous, that's been redone and painted, and that image is seen a lot, of Wesley standing outside preaching on his father's grave.
Right.
Now, we have the standing on somebody's grave or dancing on somebody's grave, which is actually
disrespectful.
It's disrespectful.
Yeah.
This was not disrespectful. He was doing it because he had no other place to preach. Safely preach without getting hassled, or I don't know if he'd be kicked out or arrested, whatever. But that was legally his property, the top of his father's grave. So he went outside and he reached the people that were outside, maybe people that would not have necessarily been inside the church walls.
Yeah.
And that's really how the Methodist revival began. And so some people came to him and said, "Hey, you are preaching, you're not assigned there. You're preaching, you're not preaching outside of your parish," was the words they used. And he said, "I consider the world my parish."
Yep.
And so that's a big saying in Methodism. Yes. And the world is our parish. And so I think both with the message from Revelation, but also recognizing Aldersgate Sunday, that's important for us to take with us, that the world is our parish. How are we going to respond to where we are now in 2024?
Yeah, and I love kind of how you kind of wrapped it up with more of this idea of living our faith. We can't just stay inside, but we have to go to that outside. We have to not, take the message of these churches that we've heard, but listen to the criticism, because that is a criticism that we can run into pretty often as well here.
Right. And, we can wring our hands. We can look at a Barna study and we can wring our hands and say, "Oh, woe is us. People just aren't coming to church anymore."
Yeah.
Or we can respond to the challenge of our calling to be the church beyond the walls, to take Christ to the world.
That's right.
And so that's kind of where we find ourselves today.
And I think that's a great place for us to kind of wrap that bow on this podcast. And I think that's the second time I use that illustration in this one, so I'm sorry for that. But as you kind of think through this, as you kind of pray through this, we're all called to do stuff outside these walls. This isn't just a Nick and Dave thing. This isn't any of the staff here at the church. We are all called to go and to show Christ, and trying to figure out how to do that and how to use your own personal gifts for that. That's kind of on you. But if you need somebody to talk through that with, my door's open 99.9% of the time. So come talk to us, come chat with us. If you've got any comments for the video, you can drop them in the Facebook or YouTube. All this stuff. We'd love to just continue to be in community and keep this idea of the world being our parish as just kind of this thing that continues to drive us. It kind of drives the Methodist Church, and I think it's something that we can take here. We're still Methodist, but to kind of continue to be mindful of what's Hickory Flat need from us specifically?
Right.
And all that stuff. So just thinking through that.
Yeah.
Without further ado, Dave, you got anything to add?
Just have a great holiday. Tomorrow, be safe and
Eat some good food.
eat some good food, and remember the sacrifice of those who gave their lives for our freedoms.
Yep.
And we will be back next week. And God bless all.
All right. You guys take care, and we'll catch you next time.